I can't see how a farm can function without functioning biodiversity. They know biodiversity, they know the benefits of having multitudes of species on their lands so that they can rotate through things properly and they can maintain soil quality, maintain water quality. They know all of that stuff. We put a word biodiversity to it, but they call it a functioning farm, but it's really biodiversity and ecosystems health. I think the greatest challenge in Nova Scotia and elsewhere to protecting ecosystems is just public awareness. Once you understand them and their fragility, to me, as a biologist, it's a no-brainer. And I think to the general public, seeing the way things are going on the planet, it's a no-brainer. We've got to turn that corner, make the change, and sort of put ecosystems on top. I became interested in biology indirectly because I always enjoyed going outside when I was a kid. I grew up in the city. Very much had my most fun when I was in summer outdoors in the woods, and that meant being outside of Toronto. Enjoying the outdoors, you sort of appreciate the fragility of it and wanting to have that to be there forever, really. In Nova Scotia, to be working in conservation biology for the provincial government is a dream job, really.
Agriculture is the second largest land-based sector that we have in the province next to forestry. It's a fairly big area that has endangered species on it, and we need to work with farmers to make sure that they understand that it's there on the properties and what they can do to maintain them. So I go to the farm and assess the farms, look at the various habitats they might have on the farm, and suggest best management practices on how to maintain biodiversity. Only recently have we added things like species at risk to that plan, and it's really kind of increased the best management practices that could be implemented on a farm.
As more agricultural land and wildlife habitat comes under pressure by development across the province, there becomes an increased need for the two to find a way to co-inhabit the same area.
And it's our job as a government and as the NGOs and as regulators to provide management practices that are effective for the species but also are effective for the producers. My role is to sort of find that sweet spot where things can proceed and everybody can be, as much as possible, be happy. We talk about plans and all these things, but plans are meaningless until somebody does something.
Clean Annapolis River Project is a community-based environmental non-government organization. We're primarily driven by our mission, which is to enhance the ecological health of the Annapolis River watershed. There's a lot of really great examples of farms within our watershed that are supporting remaining populations of wood turtles, for example, which are a species that use a mixture of habitats. So they'll use a moderately flowing river as their aquatic habitat, but they spend a lot of time on land foraging for food, and they will use forested habitats. The Nictaw River is running along this edge of the field, and so the main objective with fencing was to leave what was already a nice healthy riparian buffer area as a vegetated riparian buffer area. So in this case, we were able to cover costs of materials, and we also had a crew of people who came out to assist with labor. It's a great site because we have a few known species at risk. So there are wood turtles in this river. It's an Atlantic salmon river. And on this property, there's actually 2 species of plant that are not listed as at risk yet. But they're contenders, so unfortunately they're getting close to the point where they're under consideration for listing. We're not a regulator. We don't have any kind of legal authority to compel people to do things. We're really looking for opportunities to work in cooperation with the landowner. I think one of the important pieces of our work is helping people to recognize the values of what aren't always our stereotypically aesthetic environments. So we'll get calls from people who maybe have really fantastic wetland habitat from a biodiversity perspective, but they want to turn it into a different kind of wetland. So they want to turn their swamp into a pond most of the times. So not an uncommon call that we receive would be landowners who have beavers on their property, and they're concerned with potential flooding impacts because of the dams that they're creating. In this case, we had a farmer who uses an area for crop field, and that's adjacent to a wetland. And this beaver's been there for about 20 years, and it's created this beautiful wetland habitat. So we have at least 3 different species at risk birds that we've detected within there. There's very likely other species, we just haven't had the opportunity to do enough survey work. So this is what we wanted to preserve through this project, is this entire complex of habitat. When he contacted us, he was concerned about the potential flood risk because he doesn't want to see his fields being seasonally flooded, but recognized there was a high biodiversity value associated with that wetland. So was just looking for our ideas on where is there an opportunity to kind of meet in the middle, mitigate my flood risk, but also maintain this wetland. So over a few days, lowered the height of that dam until it was kind of at the level where we could install our device, what some people might call a beaver deceiver or a Clemson leveler. So again, just another way to manage water level. The way it's meant to work as a deceiver is that because that inflow is about 20 feet behind where we can see the pipe, you're not going to hear or feel that movement of water through the dam, which is what a beaver would be looking for to signal, I gotta fix this. So the hope is to kind of trick them into thinking there's nothing wrong, my dam's working just fine. And just in case, there is kind of a mesh cage around the intake so that they can't get in and plug it, and also to keep other big debris out of it. I mean, I guess one other thing about this site is it is simple. It didn't take a lot of time. It's not a new technology, but it was that opening opportunity to work with the landowner, have some success, and then move on to bigger things. I think one of the challenges, even personally, I've had to overcome is every project you want to have this huge impact, and it's unrealistic. It starts with a small step, but that in most cases leads to more collaboration in the future.
We're so fortunate in this industry to have so many professionals working alongside our farmers. So from agrologists to crop advisors, biologists, engineers, and so many more, farmers are becoming increasingly more equipped with the tools they need to make the decisions to be able to refine their operations to be as environmentally conscious as possible.
As we get more understanding of the wildlife around us, the pressures of more humans, more activity that we have in the landscape, we find out more and more that we have additional species that need to be added to this list. It's one of those things, the more information you have, probably we're going to have more species added to the list.
The key piece in all of this is data, right? We need to understand where the species at risk are, where the sensitive habitats are, and once that stuff is mapped, it can be kind of put into those units and guide the operators to do their business on the ground.
When we're working with species at risk, that awareness piece becomes extra challenging because we're talking about species that a lot of people aren't familiar with. You probably don't see a lot because they're species at risk. So one of the things we hear quite often is, well, how would I know if I have that on my property? I have no idea, I might. That's where we kind of start from the ground up, and we can either help with surveys or connect research partners to do that kind of baseline research type of thing, and then move on to the stewardship opportunities.
Of course, I talk about these things and it's just an action, but to a farmer, it has very real impacts on how they do things, and ultimately may or likely will affect their bottom line. So those sorts of things need to come into play.
And by and large, the people we hear from are very supportive of projects that benefit biodiversity. We've been spending a lot of time just trying to listen as much as we can about
what are the barriers that are limiting farmers' uptake to programs? Because there are some existing funding programs that would provide financial support and cost sharing for things like fencing to create a riparian buffer, and they're not necessarily being accessed. Probably the best first step right now is to contact Federation of Agriculture and probably someone within the Environmental Farm Plan program. The benefit of Nova Scotia being so small is that we do have really good networks amongst each other.
So I don't think farmers have a choice. And I'm not saying that threateningly. I'm just saying the viability of the industry is founded on having healthy biodiversity. And without that, the farm ain't gonna work, the general environment ain't gonna work, and you and I living on this planet ain't gonna work.